Hello everyone, I'm a Broken Robot. Music is easily one of my favorite artistic mediums out there. The ability to take a collection of sounds and words and turn it into a captivating rhythm that sticks with you for life is one of the greatest experiences a human or robot can have. Music has the ability to change opinions, hearts, and minds of, well, just about anyone. Music also has a habit of forming crazy new genres in the most unsuspecting places. Some famous examples include pirate metal, a Dutch music genre of singing sea shanties in the form of rock music, Amish techno, where Canadian folk bands have tried to replicate the sounds of electronic music with regular folk instruments, and of course, no one can ignore the recent trends of Midwest emo. Today, however, I'd like to share a bit of lost musical history with you, all about one of the strangest crossovers in music history that led to a beautiful combination of Mexican and Eastern European culture. But before we can go there, let's briefly discuss a nation called Yugoslavia that unfortunately no longer exists today. During the Second World War, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia found itself in an awkward position. After their government briefly sided with the Axis, the fascist government was overthrown by a monarchist wing of the army, who was then overthrown and invaded by Germany, Hungary, and Bulgaria. Despite being treated as an ally, in reality only a small portion of the Yugoslavian population supported the Axis cause, leading to widespread violence towards both the puppet government installed by the Axis and the civilian population. Many partisan groups formed to try and liberate Yugoslavia from the German puppet government, but many groups such as the Republicans, monarchists, and even two separate socialist revolts failed, leading to widespread backlash towards the civilian population. The most famous and effective Yugoslavian partisan group was led by one Joseph Tito, who used his background in the military as well as his pre-war connections to former and current politicians to slowly bit by bit gain power and support, to a point that some historians argue that it was in fact the Yugoslavian partisans that freed themselves from Germany, and not the Soviet Union, who marched in just days after the Germans withdrew from most of the country. While Tito gave his full support to the communist cause and planned to lead Yugoslavia as a socialist state linchpin, later issues would lead to the breakup between the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia that would leave the country isolated for decades. Throughout the post-war years, both Tito and other Eastern Bloc leaders found themselves increasingly under the boot of Moscow and what Stalin wanted. Tito watched as the 1946 grain fields of Ukraine were pillaged, leaving nothing for the civilian population, or the brutal repression of pro-democracy movements in Hungary in 1947. Much like Stalin, Tito was a dictator in all but name, but unlike Stalin, Tito saw the people of his nation not as farm equipment to be worked to death, but as his own countrymen, likely a trait that he picked up from working in the Yugoslavian resistance as its leader. While Moscow and the Soviet goals were to pursue military buildup and other technological advancements, Tito wanted Yugoslavia to focus more on the quality of life and make people happier in order to prevent pro-democracy movements in the first place. After Joseph Tito refused a direct order from Joseph Stalin to visit him in Moscow, Tito and Yugoslavia was blacklisted by the Soviet Union. However, that doesn't mean that economic opportunities from the West would suddenly open up. Since most of the developing world was still under the boot of European rule, and most independent nations took a hard line against communism, there were almost no trade partners for Yugoslavia. Tito's goals shifted when Yugoslavia attained true independence from the Soviet Union in 1948. Tito wanted to rapidly improve the happiness of his countrymen, but due to Yugoslavia having no film industry, many of the cinemas and theaters that were popular before the Second World War were left abandoned and unused until 1952. The only exception being a stream of Mexican films that were imported in 1949. Urban legend says that during World War II, Tito refused to let his men listen to music or watch films produced in the West, with the only exception being films from Mexico about the Mexican Revolution, since he believed that it instilled a fighting will within his men. In an attempt to boost the morale of his country, he allowed some theaters in 1950 to start showing these same films. Many Yugoslavians couldn't speak or understand Spanish, so they were forced to either pay hefty fees for a live voiceover that often ruined the quality of the films, or listen to the music and try to patch together a story, even if you didn't understand what was being said. Remember, this was before subtitles, people. Despite there being little to no Mexican influence in Yugoslavia pre-1950, by 1952 every theater in the country was showing Mexican films daily. The film Un Día de Vida was shown nationwide in 1952, with Mexican films now being officially condoned by Tito and his government. One of Tito's generals, who had served with him during World War II, had studied art in Paris pre-war and said that he was exposed to Mexican music at the university during those years, and that he believed that it would greatly improve the morale of the population if Mexican music was used on the radio instead of classical music that was being played at all hours. Thanks to a combination of the popularity of Mexican cinema and how upbeat the music was in comparison to the dull classical pipe instruments found on the radio at the time, Mexican music quickly gained popularity fast all across Yugoslavia. Mexican cultural diffusion first came when women who saw the films began wearing their hair differently than other Yugoslavian women had in the past. Mexico's trading partnership with Yugoslavia grew stronger in 1955, which led to more and more Mexican styles of clothing, headwear, and music flooding all cultural centers of Yugoslavia. This also led to a new genre of music that inspired this entire video called Yu-Mex, a style of music where the Mexican style of songwriting is applied to the languages found in the former Yugoslavia. Men began to wear sombreros daily, and many aspiring musicians in the region took on the style of the music because of its upbeat nature and just how popular Mexican culture was at the time, opposed to the American or Soviet styles of music. From the mid-1950s to the early 1970s, Mexican music held a tight grip on Yugoslavian radio channels, even as Mexican films fell out of popularity in favor of domestic Yugoslavian films that average citizens could actually understand. As time went on, Mexican music, bit by bit, lost favor with the younger generations of Yugoslavia, with rock and roll and metal becoming quite popular around the mid-1970s, firmly ending the dominance of Mexican music in Yugoslavia. While the dominance of Mexican culture and Mexican music in the former Yugoslavia is a neat bit of trivia to bring up at the dinner table, it also serves as an important lesson that sometimes the fusing of two seemingly polar opposite cultures can make great music for all to enjoy. While Yugoslavia might not exist anymore, to this day in places like Serbia and Montenegro, a small but consistent genre of Yu-Mex continues to this day, with Mexican singers still visiting the content from time to time, and Yu-Mex artists still touring all across Eastern Europe to this day. And that is the bizarre but interesting story of how wartime entertainment turned into the combination of Latino and Slavic culture. I hope you all enjoyed the video and learned something new. If you like what you see, leave a like, that way I know you guys want more content and you'd be helping me out in the YouTube algorithm personally, so hey, thanks a ton. Also, feel free to subscribe, that way you guys won't miss out on my future video essays, reviews, and commentary on whatever topic of the week that has piqued my interest. I hope you all have a great day. If you're one of my American viewers and celebrating Thanksgiving tomorrow, I hope you have a great and safe Thanksgiving. Go listen to some Yu-Mex music, it's surprisingly good, and stay cool.